Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to episode number 2 of the Artworks for Teachers podcast. So I'm your host, Susan Riley. I'm excited to be here with you again today. Now, this is going to be the last episode of just me for a little while because I have some interviews coming up. Next week, we're going to be hearing from Meryl Goldberg and her incredible story of being a spy through music. It just blows my mind every time I hear this story. So we're going to hear about that journey as well as how she became an arts integration specialist and what she does in that arena as well. So it's going to be a great time with Meryl. And so you have that to look forward to for next week. This week, I'm going to be with you today because I want to talk about something that I think is really important. And that is the idea that you can get anything you want, which sounds like clickbait, right? It's like when somebody on your Facebook feed says, here's the formula to get everything that you want in life. And it entails sitting around doing meditation and, asking the universe to provide, which there's nothing wrong with that. And by the way, I do use meditation and, so I'm not making fun exactly, but I know what it sounds like when you say, here's how to get anything you want, right? And for years I thought, that's not true. You can't possibly do that. But here's what I've actually discovered. This is actually possible, but it requires a total shift in your mind for what you're thinking, to what you're feeling, to what your actions are, and then the results that you get. And so I learned this formula, and it really is like a formula, kinda. It's really more like a model. I learned this model from my coach, Brooke Castillo, and I wanted to share it with you today because I think it's super helpful for us as people, but also as educators to push past the roadblocks that get in our way and then help us to get to where we want to be. Particularly now when we're all kind of thinking like, is this what I want to do? Is this where I want to be? What's next for me? These are all really good questions and they're really difficult to answer. So when we're thinking about that, I think the hardest question for all of us to answer is, what do you want? Right? So this model is going to help us understand how to get what you want. But the bigger, more important question, remember from last week, we talked about more asking better questions. I think the better question to ask is, what do you want? And I think it is the most difficult question for us as humans to answer because at various stages of our lives, we definitely want different things, right? And so it's constantly changing. And also, there's a whole lot of feelings that go into what you want, right? There's feelings of, I shouldn't want that. Like if you want $1 million this year, you can say that in your head, but are you going to say that out loud to somebody else? Right? Like, because there's a part of you that's probably like, I shouldn't want that, right? I should want something like world peace. And I should phrase it that way. I want $1 million so that I can do this with it, right? So that it has a qualifier on it because we feel bad if we don't put that qualifier on it. So there's lots of feelings that crop up with things that we want. If we think that we shouldn't have them, if we think that we're playing too small, if we're playing too big, there's so much wrapped up into what you want, right? And then when you think about, is this something that I really want? And is it going to benefit me long term? Or is it just something that I want in the moment? And so what are you asking me? Are you asking me for right now? Like right now, I could really use a Wendy's Frosty. But next week, I'm going to hate that Wendy's Frosty when I got to be on the Peloton for another 30 minutes, right? So when you ask that question of all of us, what do you want? I think it's the most difficult question to answer. And so we have to kind of think about, no matter what it is that you want, just pick something. How do we then achieve it? That's part one. Part two is, why do we want to even focus on this topic, right? Particularly on this show, right? When we're talking about how art works for teachers. Well, why are we going to focus on this? Well, a couple of reasons. Because when we're using creative approaches like arts integration or STEAM or project-based learning or social emotional learning through the arts, or other creative approaches with our students, our fear of our previous experiences, either the fear that we're not good enough or that we can't do this because I don't really have the background in it, or our previous experiences of trying and failing, right, often prevent us from being successful, right? So I want to use more creative approaches in my classroom, but I flopped when I tried it before, or my students didn't respond well previously, or my curriculum doesn't have enough space in it and I really don't have time and I'm being judged and evaluated based on the reading curriculum and the math curriculum, so I can't, right? So we have all of these things that surround us when we want to use more creative approaches, but we have these roadblocks. So this is a model to help us overcome that, right? And also, just from a human aspect, you have big dreams and goals and you deserve to reach them. I know that you do. I know that you have big dreams sitting somewhere inside of you. And some of you are like, heck yes, I do. And here's exactly what they are. And some of you don't want to acknowledge them because if you reach for more, it feels like you're not grateful for what you have. And that's untrue as well. So you have these dreams, you have these goals for yourself, and you deserve to be able to reach them. So I want to share this model with you because it has literally changed everything about how I operate. And I have found this so helpful for me. And literally, the more you do it, the better you get at it. So it's something that requires practice. And so I want to introduce it early because we'll refer to it over time, this model of how to get anything that you want, right? So when I've used this model, I've gotten what I set out to achieve every single time. And I want that for you too. I want you to have this success because you can't fail in this model. You really can't. There's one spot where you can get stuck, but you can't fail if you use the model. So now if you are kind of like, I don't know about this, like this, again, sounds clickbaity, right? And literally I tried to find any other title other than this one, but I landed on this one because literally the truth, it is how I've been able to kind of get whatever it is that I wanted. I've shared it with my family and they've had success at it as well. I share it with my team and suddenly my team members are getting successful at these things that they want. So that's why I'm sharing it, right? So, but if you don't believe it's possible, there's another person that I know who has used this model and he has been extremely successful. He's an artist that I think you might know. He used this model to kind of kickstart his own goals. So on February 7th, 1964, Billy Joel was watching the Beatles arrive in America for the very first time. And when he saw them, it was like a lightning bolt, a dream that he didn't even know that he had kind of bubbled right to the surface. And it was the only thing that he could think about then, right? It took shape and it was the thing that then defined him. And it was that he decided in that moment that he wanted to become a rock and roll musician. Now, he's 15 at the time, right? And if you think back to when you were 15 and you were so sure of what it was that you wanted at the time, right? To have that level of assuredness again would be amazing, right? So at 15, that's not such a rarity, right? To say, oh, I want to be a rock and roll musician. But for Billy Joel, this was a little different because he had always been a musician. He had been playing the piano since he was 3. He was in bands for all kinds of different bands at different seasons of his life. So certainly he knew that, music was what called to him, but it was in the moment that he saw the Beatles, he realized that it was possible for anyone, even people who were from areas of London that were, not the most reputable, for anybody to become a rock and roll musician. And so he decided that's what he wanted to be, but he had this issue, right? He had always been playing the piano. This is where his musical genius lies, right? Is in the piano. But he had been mostly playing classical music all of his life. Now he would take these classical tunes and kind of twist them around. And so and that was kind of his way of cheating it, right? He would start on a Mozart sonata and then, or a Beethoven, piece and like get the first part of it and then just kind of start to improvise and play around with it. So he had this ability to kind of twist classical music into something new and different. But it wasn't something that he did more than just for himself, right? So soon as after he kind of saw the Beatles come in and he realized this is what I want to do, he was like, I can't keep playing just classical music. I need to kind of start to move this into the rock and roll realm. So soon the Mozart Sonata in C became the melody inspiration for Uptown Girl. And Beethoven's Sonata Pathétique became the hook for This Night. And so these pieces of music started to generate kind of all on their own, but he encountered another problem. Most songwriters wrote the lyrics first and then the music, right? But Billy had always heard the music first and really struggled with the lyrics. And his dreams of becoming a musician like his idols, the Beatles, really started to seem impossible because the Beatles were known for writing the lyrics on a napkin and then going and writing the music that accompanied it and having it be this big hit. Everything kind of latched on those lyrics. And he really had a difficult time with that, right? So how could you create a hit song if you didn't have the words? So what he did was he took it back to his band and he would take his music and start with a bunch of lyrics and his band would give him like absolute feedback. And it was the best kind of feedback. It wasn't flowery. It was like straight to the point. Man, that stinks. It needs to change over to this, or that really doesn't land, or that works, but this part doesn't. And so he took that feedback and he kept pushing and working as a piano player in local bars to build up his experience and getting that feedback from even the patrons themselves, right? Then he started to notice the patrons and started listening to what they were saying and took that in and kind of pulled it all together. And eventually these words ended up as music for his hit song, Piano Man. Right? Giving him the confidence to then keep writing songs. Because once he had a hit, he kind of figured out, oh, here's how I did that. And he went back and he listened some more and he asked more questions of people and he listened to his audience members and took more of that and put it into his next set of songs. And he kept building that one after the other after the other. And now he's one of the greatest rock and roll musicians of our time. So what this model is, if you're not familiar with it, is called the 4C model. And the 4 C's are commitment, courage, capability, and confidence. And so I'm going to share my screen. For those of you who are watching on video, I'm going to share my screen so that you can see the worksheet. If you are not watching the video, if you're listening to this as a podcast, remember to come on over to artsintegration.com/artworks, and you're going to be able to download this resource as well as all of the other resources from our other episodes. So you can see the 4C model to get anything you want. We've got commitment, courage, capability, and confidence. So the first step to working on your own goals or whatever it is that you're working towards is a commitment, right? That this is when you have a thought to do something and you make a decision to do it, right? I'm going to decide that this is the year that I use arts integration. This is the year that I'm not going to take work home after 4 p.m., that I'm done, right? So I'm going to be able to have a home life. Whatever your decision is, that's your commitment. Now, what happens when you make a commitment? What's the very first thing that happens to you? Your brain immediately begins to come up with excuses for all kinds of reasons why you cannot do that commitment that you've promised to yourself, right? And this is just your brain protecting you. This is the amygdala that we have that fight or flight response, right? That old piece of our brain from when we were hunters and gatherers, that here's all the reasons why your decision might not be the best decision for you, right? It's an evolutionary habit, right? So what your brain does is it starts to fill in your fears with a lot of different voices. So because a decision is different than what you're currently doing, you need courage to face the natural objections that rise to the surface. Things like fear or anger or frustration or I can't do it I'm not good enough. This is too hard. I don't really need or want this. This is the area we get stuck. Sometimes this is referred to as the river of misery because nothing in this area, number 2, feels good. It all feels really crappy, negative. Just it feels like too hard that we can't do it. But if we can stick it out into the courage phase and reframe those fears into more positive action steps. And when I say positive, I'm not saying woo-woo. I'm saying we're actually going to move forward with something. We're going to reframe the fear or the anger or the frustration into something that causes us to take action. If we can do that, then what happens is that we build capability, right? Because once you face your objections and you push forward, you're going to find that you're capable of achieving your original decision or commitment. And then it feels great. And once you have that under your belt, you have proven that you're capable of achieving that commitment. And it gives you confidence that you can do the next thing that you want to achieve or change. So this is how you get to whatever it is that you want. And so in the worksheet that we have this outlined, and then we have a space on the right for your turn, where there's a couple of questions that guide you through this. So the first one is, what's your decision or commitment? Write it down. Then how does it make you feel? And you're probably not going to feel really good about it. You might feel good about it for like 24 hours, maybe a week. And then, then after that first 24 hours or that week, you start to notice like all the reasons why you can't keep up with that commitment, right? So what does that make you feel then? Write that down. How can we reframe those feelings into something that's more useful to us? And when you reframe your feelings into something that's more useful, you can then take action on those feelings. What does that action look like for you? And then based on your actions that occur, what are the results that happen? Okay. So that's the model in a nutshell. So here's how the model plays out in and out of the classroom. So let's take something that's outside of the classroom. It's just something that a lot of people do, trying to lose weight, right? So lots of people commit in January. I'm gonna lose weight. So they put that in there. I'm gonna lose 20 pounds in 2 months. Okay, so we put that in there. How does that make me feel? Well, at the beginning, that makes me feel really empowered, right? When I'm doing this in January, I'm like, yes, I'm going to do that. It makes me feel strong and confident, and I'm going to be more healthy. And in about 48 hours, after I've eliminated, all of the good stuff, the sugar and the white bread, and I've cut back my portion sizes and no more dessert, I suddenly get to the point where my body is like, no, kicking and screaming. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. This stinks, right? This is painful. I have a headache. I can't do this because if I eliminate sugars, I get massive migraines and I just can't do that, right? I can't possibly keep that up. Or I could do this maybe for a couple of months, but then I'm not going to be able to sustain it. Like I'm not going to be able to not eat sugar again. So I might as well just, give up now and just try to moderate it a little bit, right? Those are the things that we start to write down, right? So if we reframe some of those feelings, which are just fear and frustration, kind of manifesting themselves at the top, if we reframe some of those things in that, by cutting sugar out, I am going to get a migraine. I can prepare for that with some ibuprofen, or if I need, my Imitrex, I can have that on hand. I know that's coming, and that's because the sugar was bad for me. And that should be an indicator for me that I really shouldn't be on that sugar, right? So now I'm going to cut out sugar because it's bad for my brain. And I really need my brain to operate well, right? So that's going to make me feel a little bit more empowered, because I'm making a decision now that is based on the fact that this wasn't good for me. And I really need to not have this in my life because it does give me migraines. It's a bad experience. Or if it's I can't get rid of this for all time, that's not sustainable, so I'm only going to moderate. Well, when we moderate, it doesn't necessarily help us either, because then we're always doing that cheat day, right? So, because every day becomes a cheat day. Oh, I'll just do a little bit here, and suddenly it's not working anymore, right? We didn't meet our commitment. So how can I reframe that? I can set aside Saturday night to have a dessert of my choosing, but it can only be before 7 p.m. so that my body, has time to process everything. And it can only be the size of my fist. That's the size of whatever it is that I'm going to have, which takes the fun out of it. But what it does is it really focuses in on okay, if I'm going to choose moderation, then I'm going to choose exactly what it is that I'm going to have and when. Again, I reframe that so that I can take a positive action step that is going to lead to more positive things in the future, right? So now when I've reframed that, what actions can I take? So I know that I can make sure that I'm not cheating or having anything additional in my diet until that Saturday. And hopefully that's worth it then, right? And I'm going to choose really carefully. And then what are my results? Well, if you're cutting out everything and only having that one little dessert on Saturdays, you're going to see results, right? Like that's the results you're going to get. And is it going to meet your decision or commitment? Probably, right? So that's an example of how to use it in just outside of the classroom. If we're going to talk about like something in the classroom, like let's say we're going to use arts integration this year. So my commitment is to use arts integration this year with my students. And then how does that make me feel? At the beginning, that's great. This is going to be something that the students are going to love, and I'm going to really enjoy doing with them. It's going to bring back my creative spark. And then you're going to hit a wall because you don't know the standards in another content area, or you don't have an art teacher who's willing to collaborate with you, or you don't have a classroom teacher who's willing to collaborate with you, or all of these other things that happen. And so then we're stuck in that courage area. So how do we get courage to reframe what it is that's happening? So if the art teacher won't work with me, can I find another arts teacher who's willing to work with me? Maybe the music teacher, maybe a local dance teaching artist could support me. Is there, can I send a sample lesson of something that I want to connect with and ask that particular person, just kind of save them time and say, hey, is there something that you do along these lines? I would like to develop something like this. Doesn't have to happen tomorrow, but I am planning on doing this within the next month. Can you help me? So that, again, you're taking the initiative there, right? You still can't get somebody to work with you. Can you find somebody online? Is there an online group that you could go to get that support? If you run into the roadblock of I can't find standards and I don't have time to do this, how can I save myself time? Is there something out there that's already done that I can try to use instead of trying to recreate the wheel, right? So how do I reframe all of the pushback that my brain is going to give me? Once I reframe it, then what action steps can I take? Well, if I can find resources online of lessons that have already been created, I can use those lessons, plug them in and give them a try. And then I will be taking action on my decision or commitment. And then I'm going to be able to see the results of working with that decision, right? So again, this model really does work. It's about your thoughts, which I think is so exciting because our thoughts are really what change everything for us. And we have total control of our thoughts. Absolutely. So if you want to change or get anything you want, you just have to change your thought process. Now, I say just because it sounds like it, oh, that's so easy. It's not, right? we have so many thoughts per day, and most of them are on the same loop. So changing our thoughts are really difficult. But if we can know that the reason I'm stuck here, the reason that this doesn't feel good, the reason that I don't feel like I'm making progress, or that I'm not seeing success in whatever it is that I'm trying to do, is because I have a thought error somewhere and I need to change the thought and change the feeling, then I can have better actions. That is so empowering. So when we're using this model, I want us to think about the idea that courage is tethered through curiosity. The way that you pass through that river of misery, that courage area is by moving through your feelings and resistance. And how do you do that? By getting curious about why you're feeling this way or why you're resisting the change. And then take that why and reframe it in your mind onto something more empowering. Now, we see this all the time in our arts integration certification program. People come in and they're so excited in sprint one, and then they get really, really frustrated really quickly because they have all of these things that they're now trying to do, and they have a lot of resistance, a lot of fear. And so this is the area where we're constantly coaching them and working with them around, we can move through this. We just have to identify why you're feeling this way. Why are you resisting the idea of standards connection? Why are you resisting working with another content area or working on a different grade level? So, and then once you answer the why, we can break it down and work through it, right? Everything is on the other side of your fear. So if you can find the courage to be curious and then create different thoughts, you can literally have anything you want, right? Lastly, you have to be very clear about what you want. We talked about this at the top of the episode. It is one of the most difficult questions that we can face. And I'm going to be exploring a process for clarifying what you want in a future episode. But in the meantime, I want you to think of it the way Billy Joel writes music. Write it backwards. Think about to get to what you want, think about what you don't want, and then work backwards. Don't forget to stop by our podcast episode page over at artsintegration.com/artworks to pick up today's handout for the 4C model. Look for episode 2. That's where that is. And if you're enjoying this series and know of another educator who could benefit, please share it with them and make sure that you subscribe to get each new episode in your podcast area every single Thursday. Until next time, my friend, stay curious and creative.